Okay. All right, Joyce, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Okay, sure.
Are we recording this just so he's aware?
He is and I am. So we're
Okay.
both,
I wanted to
we're
make
both
sure that you
recording.
you were.
Made me aware. Yes.
All right. So, um, I guess first question is first. Uh, Joyce, like, what? Tell us about yourself. Who you are, what you do, all that good stuff.
So I am a 34-year-old man. I was born and raised here in Omaha, not very far from where I live now, in Midtown Omaha. I went to a small Lutheran church school called Mount Calvary Lutheran Church and School at 55th and Leavenworth. I went there from preschool all the way through eighth grade. And then I went to Central High School in downtown Omaha, all through high school. And then I've done a little bit of college at UNL, a little bit of college at Metro, and a little bit of college at UNO. I studied political science, and American history. And I did not complete a degree, but that is what I studied when I attended those places for a time before I got into the bike share industry as a bicycle mechanic. And I've been in the bike share industry as a bicycle mechanic uh, since 2016, working that. And 2016, I moved to Philadelphia after having worked on the Bernie Sanders campaign. Not worked, I volunteered for Bernie Sanders here in Nebraska and Iowa. And then somebody who was working on that campaign offered me a job at a different company in Philadelphia. And so I moved there. And I hated that work. And so I got involved with, I like got a job on chance with the bike share in Philadelphia. And then Omaha has a bike share. And I moved back. And I had been planning to run for state senate for a while. And I did that in 2020. I ran for state senate in the primary in Midtown in Legislative District 9. Um, and then I moved to Boston for a little bit during the pandemic, and I worked for the bike share in Boston. And I had the privilege of being elected a union shop leader in Boston for 2 years. And I served as a shop leader for 2 years for Transit Workers Union Local 320. I helped negotiate a new contract for that union, which serves bike share companies all across the country, um, including like DC and New York and Chicago, and San Francisco and Los Angeles. And I have been like, when I started volunteering for Bernie Sanders, I was sort of like a little bit lost. I had been raised as a conservative Republican. My father was a police officer. My mother was in the Air Force National Guard, and they're both very conservative people, pretty religious as well. And then I sort of realized I was gay at some point, and um, that led to more questioning. It didn't lead to me like sort of rejecting God because I was gay. I sort of held on to my faith for a couple more years before I decided I couldn't really believe in God anymore. Um, and from there, I sort of started to become more interested in more radical politics because of my queer identity and the things I was reading about atheism at the time and part of the new atheist movement. And Bernie Sanders got me interested in democratic socialism. I started a little DSA chapter when I was in school at UNO in 2016 for that semester when I was there. When I moved to Philly, I got involved and went to a couple meetings of a Philly socialist group who had a tenant union. And then when I moved back to Omaha to run for public office, I also helped a few people start Omaha Tenants United in 2018. And OTU is still a thing that's happening, although I'm not as involved with them anymore. Um, and somewhere in that 2016, 2019, 2020 time period, I became a socialist and decided I was a communist and started studying communism more. And that's where I've been since then. And I'd like you guys to tell me about yourselves too. I don't know anything about you guys.
Cooper, you're muted again. Some technical difficulties. I can go first, and go to Riker, and then when Cooper gets back, we can go to Cooper. So I'm 21. Kind of the same boat as you. I was born in Bellevue. Then my parents and I moved out to Murray when I was about 11, and then
Hmm.
I moved back to Omaha. So I live in Omaha now. Been here for coming up on 2 years. I got into politics. I've always been interested in politics, especially when like Ben Shapiro, Steven Crowder, like those guys are really big. Got into Charlie Kirk a bit. Was a fan for a while, and then his passing kind of got me more radical. And then in with these two, um, kind of the same boat as you. I didn't grow up as a Lutheran. I grew up in a kind of a Baptisty home, so I went to a private school for most of my life. Went to a Baptist private school for the last 2 years. And then I was also in that same boat. I went to Metro while I was in high school, got an associate's there, and then now I'm a first responder. So I do that. Um, as for politics, I was raised Christian conservative, and I've stuck with it. So I'm here to debate somebody who I guess kind of went through a similar um, trajectory as me, but kind of shifted. So I'll try to keep it brief. Riker, do you want to go really quick?
Real quick, Caleb, what are your parents for work? What's your parents' background?
So same as you, my dad's a cop, and then
Oh, wow.
my mom's a teacher.
Okay.
So yep,
Interesting.
Wait, wait,
almost
check,
identical.
check.
You're back, Cooper.
I'm back.
You're back.
Okay. Sorry, guys.
You're good.
I'm not sure why it keeps happening.
Riker, do you want to go really quick?
Yeah. So um, I was born. First off, I'm 22, turned 23 in July. I was born in Northern Virginia, DC area. My parents, my stepdad is government. He works at the Pentagon. My mother owns a photography business in Germany. I was kind of raised in Northern Virginia to moderate liberal parents. My grandpa was kind of the only conservative person in my family. Um, and throughout my life, I was kind of surrounded by moderate and kind of very liberal people, especially on my stepdad's side of the family. Middle school, I moved to Nebraska because my stepdad had a job at Offutt. I was here for a little bit, and then I moved to Germany for high school for 4 years, which is when I was kind of introduced to politics in its full form. I met people from every side of the angle. Most of my high school were very left, far left people, including teachers and students alike. A lot of teachers were kind of pushing the political agenda. I never noticed until my sophomore year. Um, I started out as a socialist around this point, and then moving into college, I went to Texas for my associates. I kind of became libertarian. I disagreed with a lot of socialist thought, and I heavily disagreed with communism. And then I moved to Nebraska after my associates, currently in the process of joining the military, where up to and around the death of Charlie Kirk, I went from libertarian to more nationalist. And that's kind of where I'm at now.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
All right. Can you guys hear me?
You're good.
Okay. um, my name's Cooper. I was born and raised in Fremont, Nebraska, which is just northwest of Omaha. I've lived here pretty much my entire life. I lived in Bennington for like a year, but I live in Fremont now. And growing up, I was never really in tune with politics very much. I kept it kind of far. I was not interested until I started to kind of get somewhat into it with YouTube creators, kind of like Caleb, like Ben Shapiro, Steven Crowder, gosh, who else? Charlie Kirk, a bit later on. But I was never really, too in touch with it. It was just kind of something I sort of had a mild interest in. And then Charlie Kirk got assassinated, and then it kind of lit a bit of a fire in me to be I find it to be our civic duty to, no matter what we believe in, at least fight for it on a civic level, and to stand up for what you believe in, and uh, you know whether that be left, right, center, up, down, whoever. We all should at least be civically aware and vote and voice our opinions on political matters. Where I'm at now, as I met Caleb and Riker at UNO. I was never a student at UNO. I graduated college in Fremont at Midland University. But I brought a sign to UNO that said that I was conservative, and to just come talk to me, just because I wanted to open up political discourse, just kind of face to face like Charlie did, just so that people could, see different opinions, and if they wanted to talk to me, they could, get my side of, what and why I believe things. Um, I met Caleb and Riker, and we formed our nonprofit, Pax Americana Concordium, which we just got federalized today. So that's exciting. And yeah, we are looking to bring about kind of conservative uh, ideas into the ethos, into the sphere of political discourse in and around the Omaha area. But our main goal and our mission is to just open up political discourse in a respectful and a civil way, which is what I'm very happy to be doing that here with you, Joyce. So, thank you for joining us, and that's enough about me.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. I've also I've interviewed a couple other people separately already. So when you guys talked about talking on your little podcast, I was interested because I'm sort of starting a podcast of my own that I'm calling Some College. And that's why I'm recording this, because I'm hoping to I'll put this out there as well. If I like the way that this goes.
Perfect, wonderful. Okay,
I
awesome.
just got a 7 minute warning on the stream, like on this. So I'm gonna try to make sure that doesn't just like shut off randomly. Just so you guys know, I'm just doing
Seven
that.
minute warning. Okay. All right. Well, first and foremost, I just kind of wanted to ask you, on our Instagram post, you called us white supremacists. Uh, well, I would. That's kind of the thing on my forefront. Why do you believe that?
Well, I consider TP to be a white supremacist organization that pushes pretty explicit supremacist propaganda and ideology on a regular basis. And I believe that you guys are sort of associated with them somehow in some way. You can clear that up for me, whether or not that's true. But I think that, simply the people that you all sort of talked about, and then Riker even sort of explicitly called himself a nationalist. These are all sort of white supremacist adjacent or explicitly white supremacist people, who are saying and doing white supremacist things, in my opinion. So you guys are more than close enough for me to be suspicious. And I'll just say that, like, I've come across the TPUSA people at UNO a couple times. I don't know if Caleb, you were there or not. There was one young man who came and talked to my group as we were writing messages. And he said he was not actively involved with TPUSA, that he just happened to be walking by. But he sort of questioned me as if he sort of agreed with TPUSA and things like that. And we had a longer discussion. One of the fundamental points that I made to him was that I believe that almost everything that organization does is like fundamentally dishonest. Like, there's so many, every talking point I've been confronted with by like a TPUSA person, like on the street or something, has been like a gaslighty, dishonest, like, I'm gonna say something that's like race baity, or like this isn't true about transgender people, and I'm going to force me to like actually say, well, no, actually, I have to correct you. This isn't correct, and like I have to argue against like a fantasy straw man version of reality. Um, just like been the consistent behavior of TPUSA's people, in my opinion. So I'll just start with that as an answer to why I would call you guys white supremacists on the internet.
Yeah, so that's all sorted out, the whole shutting down thing. We're good there. To clear up, because I know we mentioned it a little bit in those Instagram chats. So we were with Turning Point. We had some just some internal issues with a couple other members, and so we split off and did this now, just like full time. I thought it would pop up on my screen, but hopefully that's nothing bad. Yeah, so we just wanted to pursue this ourselves full time. As for you said, you were doing something on campus with like a group that you're a part of. Is that right? Did I hear that right?
Yeah, it was a DSA, an Omaha DSA thing. We were going out and writing chalk messages on places.
Are you the one that wrote the chalk in front of our table?
Yeah, it might have been me. Yeah, well, there's several of us did, but yeah, I wrote a big message. Yeah.
Yep, yep. I was there for that one. Yeah. And I think at the time I was like, you should come talk to us. And you guys didn't want to, but that's okay.
I don't think I wanted to talk to an actual like TPUSA booth again. Like I just fundamentally dishonest questions, that are almost a waste of time to even engage with because they're obviously trolling you, you know.
Okay. What kind of questions, I guess? Like,
Um, things just like there are so many things that people like Charlie Kirk and Ben Shapiro and what was the third guy, Crowder. There are
harder.
so many. Like I didn't have time. I didn't make a list of things. But there's just like any number of things that these people have said that I think are demonstrably racist. That envision like a white supremacist worldview. They espouse great replacement theory. They say it in vague language. But one of the questions, as an example, it would just be like, how are we racist? And it's like, again, like there's only so much benefit of the doubt that I can give to people who say and do racist things all of the time. I'm not going to like, if you're so like out of touch with reality that you don't know about all of the different things that people like Charlie Kirk and Ben Shapiro have said and done over the years that have been just like objectively racist. Like, let's just start with Ben Shapiro's wet ass pussy review video. Like they've come around on Nicki Minaj, but like that moment in time is just like an objectively like anti-black reaction from Ben Shapiro. He's just like having a very bad reaction to all of these other things that lots of other artists have done plenty of times before who have been white people. There's plenty of examples of explicit lyrics in white people's country music and things like that that have come before Nicki Minaj's wet ass pussy. So it's not like, and again, this is just like one example, but like I think that's an example, that question of like that they would come up and be like, how are we racist? And it's like I don't have time for this. Like I don't have time to debate openly racist people about like how are you racist. And there's things about transgender people and queer people in general. There's so many like dishonest narratives about transgenderism and things. Like the idea of transgenderism itself is a lie and a fabrication of the far right. There is no transgenderism. That doesn't mean anything. But they talk about it as if it's a political movement to like seduce children into becoming transgender or something insane like that. It's just constant. It's literally 100%. What's the opposite of grassroots? Astroturfed. Like it's literally businesses and corporations and oligarchs funneling money into propaganda organizations like TPUSA to put out a conservative narrative that is entirely like white Christian nationalist in its character. Nothing about them is organic or not white supremacist. Everything about them is pushing like a nativist, like isolationist Christian nationalist viewpoint. The entire organization is like a fake organization paid for by oligarchs.
Hey,
I'm very interested to hear like why you guys broke away from them actually, because like I mean, on some level that's like a smart decision, but I'm always like perplexed by conservatives who are like, no, we're gonna do conservatism the right way this time, and I'm like, you may just like I don't know, there are other options.
I'll give you the short rundown. So I was, and like we can talk about this a little bit, but it's some weird drama. But I was,
Episode 2 of our podcast is a full like laid out and
mhm.
detailed
If you want the like the
if you
whole
want
like
more.
Yeah.
2 hour long story, but basically, they didn't like that we were starting our own organization because they didn't want us to free speak about a couple of things. It was kind of weird, and so they basically compiled a list of like group chat messages that were taken like super out of context and said that was the reason that they were impeaching me and kicking out Cooper Maker. That's like the very blunt version.
The TPUSA people did this?
TPUNO, but
The UNO chapter.
yeah.
Yeah.
So like I said, I still support like TPUSA in general, but that chapter in particular really just shot us down. It was kind of weird, and
Now I'm almost like really scared to ask like what was in the group chat that they were like, this is not about TPUSA anymore. Like
so
I'm
we go
Literally
nervous to
nothing.
ask the
in
question.
that podcast episode 2, we go through every single message. It was literally nothing. But I mean, what are you gonna do? I mean, one of them was like I said, my favorite one was I said, I was talking to Riker and I was like, "Did you see the JD Vance interview at TPUSA where they were quizzing him on Israel?" And he was like, "No, I didn't see it. Oh wait, I did see it." And I was like, "Good watch." And he was like, "Yep." Like that was it. And they were like, "You're out of here for it."
Or no, it was like, did you see like he got grilled? Like Caleb
Yep.
mentioned that JD Vance got grilled
Hmm.
on the Israel issue, and apparently that was part of grounds for his impeachment and
Huh.
kicking me out as well.
And this was to clarify. This was I was at work one day. Like I was just working, and then I got a text that said, "Hey, we voted to impeach you." I was like, "Oh, okay."
That sound, correct me if I'm wrong, but that sounds like they want you to have like a 100% of the time positive, forward-facing like narrative. And for a hot second in a group chat one time, you were like, "Ooh, damn, like that might not have looked good for JD Vance in that interview." And they were like, "Hey, like stay on message. Like it was a great interview. It was the best interview ever." Is that what they're trying to do? Like,
So before we get into like our own personal politics, I think we'll find some agreement here because I feel like what I've noticed about the Republican Party recently, especially after that situation, was it's freedom of speech and it's like have your own opinion and talk about everything until you start criticizing the Republican Party, and then it's like whoa, you can't do that. You can't say that JD Vance had a bad interview. You can't say like the Turning Point chapter isn't doing enough. Like you can't say those things. You can't criticize Interior. So that was kind of the issue that I saw. It was like, oh, we're doing all this tabling and we're doing all these events and it's awesome. And then I say a couple things that's like, I wish we were doing more as a chapter, and I wish, did you see that JD Vance interview where he didn't do so great? And then they're all like, you're out, you're out of the club.
you have
So
something to add, Riker?
Um, considering most of the group chat leaks is me. Um, I am one of the more vocal members of the group. I'm pretty certain that was one of the main reasons why I got outed pretty fast, because there was the whole thing about how the leader of TPUNO reached out to Cooper. Well, I think it was Cooper reached out to him and basically said that Cooper needs to avoid Caleb and I. Because I have made many remarks against the Republican Party. I make remarks against every party. I and in the group chat I mentioned TPUNO several times about how I didn't like how things were going, which a lot of those were in the screenshots. Um, so it, I still don't know exactly why or the explicit reason for us being removed, because there were kind of several. The number one being I. The number one reason I could have think of was me allegedly being misogynist, which was kind of where it all began, and then where it ended up wasn't even close to that. It was just a bunch of screenshots related to us criticizing TPUNO and also talking about the JD Vance situation.
Well, so you'll get a kick out of this. Originally, they didn't want to show everybody the reason that they impeached me. They wanted to hide the messages. They were like, "Oh, we're not gonna tell you guys why we impeached him. We're just gonna kick him out and not show anybody the messages." And then like half the group chat left, and they were like, "Well, hold on, we'll show you guys the messages if everybody agrees." And so we agree, and then they send them out, and it was like stupid. So
Very interesting. That's very interesting. I'm ready for
but
your
yeah,
next.
I think that turning point. I don't feel like they're super dishonest. I'd like to hear a couple examples. I know people. There's a couple that people like to bring up, and so I'm always open to hearing you out on that. As for
Uh,
the wet ass pussy song, I don't remember that super well. But Cooper, you were laughing about it. So do you remember that?
Yeah, I
that's from
definitely
it's
I
like from
definitely remember that.
2020.
Yeah, it was when the song came out. He made like a counter.
Oh, the look at the stats. I got the facts. That one.
Is that what you're referring to, Joyce?
He made like a long video that sort of went viral. And he just, he just went on and on and on about like how it made him uncomfortable, and it was just so stupid. Big incel energy. Like it just like he was uncomfortable with her just in general. Like there was no substantive argument to it. It was just like this, I don't like this, and I don't. It's like he doesn't even understand. He obviously doesn't think he's racist. And so he like says and does so many he does like this mental gymnastics, this long video to like go out of his way to like tell why he's believing this is wrong or something. And it was just so silly.
I
Like,
mean, I think I kind of see his point though. When I mean, you rap about your genitals being aroused, that can definitely make some people uncomfortable. I feel like, right? I mean, that's not out of the realm of reality.
And also the fact that it was like the number one song in America, and it was on top of the fact that they they essentially banned the song "Baby It's Cold Outside," but "Wet Ass Pussy" became super popular in the same year.
I do
Yeah,
remember this now. Yeah, because that was the whole debacle was they were banning it. Maybe it's cold outside, but then this wet ass pussy song was like popping off.
Joyce, can you kind of see the like? I don't find that song comfortable to listen to just because it's talking about somebody's genitals being aroused, and that's something that I like to keep private. Um,
Sorry, not I'll let you speak out of this, but as for racism, like if a white person had sang that same song, I would feel equally as uncomfortable. Um,
I, I
so
sort of
I
see.
don't listen to any songs about sex or genitals. It's fucking weird.
I don't know if you guys are familiar with John Waters. He's a really old gay guy who's directed a lot of pretty crazy movies. And he's sort of like, I forget like the actual like words he would use to describe his movies, but like it's just like degenerate comedy, And I think there's like a spectacle about like what Nicki Minaj did in that video that like I like laughed at it. Like I thought it was so goofy and like over the top that it was just like absurd. I just like I laughed at it and I moved on. I'm not a Nicki Minaj fan. I wasn't back then, and I'm certainly not now, as she's like warmed up to Trump and stuff. But like, yeah, and I don't think that this example sort of warrants further discussion either. It's just sort of a very vapid, silly example. Like we could talk about the things that Charlie Kirk has said about trans people, as another sort of example of the harmful uh, narratives that come out of TPUSA or something else.
okay, yeah,
Or if you have specific questions, I don't know.
so
I think you're
I'm
right.
yeah, and I'm pretty open. I mean, this is kind of I'm interested to hear what you have to say. So I mean, whatever political issue, transgender, abortion, like whatever political issue that you really want to hammer away at, I mean, I'm pretty open to talking about any of them. So I mean,
Could I ask a clarifying question first?
Sure.
Do you just to get this out there, right? I love black people. I love Mexican people. I love Asian people. I love Native American people. I love all people. And as a Christian, that's something that obviously we're called to do, but it's also something that I just find innately within myself. I don't have to try and love people of color. I just do, just as much as I love
Glad to hear.
anybody else.
Glad to-
So, with that being said, I am a conservative, right? I obviously don't agree with any actually like racist sentiments or any actually like sexist or any ist sentiments that target something that people can't change. Um, would you consider me a white supremacist?
So I think that like in politics, especially the powers that be in this country, they want us to think that politics is very simple, that it's like a left-right binary, Republican Democrat thing, and that it's very easy to like identify things. And I think that you can be a white supremacist and like have like a Klan robe in your closet and like go out and do actual violence. And I think you can also be just like a really like passive, useful idiot white supremacist. And like politics is like entertainment to a lot of people in this country. I don't speak to my parents because they're kind of emotionally abusive to me, but they also are like fascist sympathizers. Like they truly like they would insist that they had to support Trump and all of these things, and that was a part of the problems that I had with them, on top of the other things that I had problems with them. But their politics was like a small slice of the pie, and they truly did not understand that their support for Donald Trump and Pete Ricketts and Deb Fisher and Don Bacon are supporting narratives and policies about immigrants, transgender people, queer people in general. And again, like anyone who isn't a straight white person who's a Christian is in danger under this administration, in my opinion. And so, like, my parents are like clueless, passive supporters of white supremacy. And in my opinion, there's a term that that was popular after World War II called like good Germans. We were just good Germans, like we didn't know what was going on. And I think there's a lot of good Germans in the United States. People who like innocently think that like, oh, I'm just supporting like, this like narrative about the American dream that I believe in that isn't really connected to reality, or they like actually like don't understand what they're supporting at all and they're just like playing team politics. There's a lot of different people on that spectrum. And so like I wouldn't like right now, after everything you guys have said on this video, I would not like call you a white supremacist to your face anymore. But like you might support policies that I would consider to be like white supremacist politics, or politicians that obviously I just listed out our entire federal delegation here. I don't like any of those people, and I consider them to be actively harmful. I could probably list out different things and some of them have said that are racist or classist or some bullshit. Pete Ricketts is a garbage person. I hate that man so much. Um, but yeah, I would not call you a white supremacist. That's my answer.
Okay, I appreciate that because I definitely am not. But I would love to hear. So I think the political person that I think I align the most with, obviously not 100%. That's going to be pretty rare, but the person that I align the most with was probably Charlie Kirk. So I'd be interested to hear your thoughts. Like I think you mentioned that he had said, was it racist things or transphobic things or maybe all of them? Um, I would be curious to hear what you think about Charlie Kirk and some of the things that he said.
I mean, I've got a little list here from The Advocate, and there's a lot of things he said that were just like hyperbolic nonsense, like transgender people are, he said, quote, there's a direct connection to inflation and the trans issue, which is like an absolutely absurd thing to say. And then he also he had an interview with Riley Gaines, and he said quote, we should have just took care of trans people, quote, the way we used to take care of things in the 1950s and 60s, which is implying physical violence in order to prevent minorities from being themselves in public, being like free and having civil rights in public. He thinks that people and queer people are like bad for society and that we shouldn't be open about ourselves in public. We shouldn't be visible in public. He believes our visibility in public is offensive to him, and maybe even harmful. He would argue that it's harmful, like children shouldn't be allowed to see trans people or drag queens or something. And that is in itself a small like part of a larger superstructure of white supremacy.
Gotcha. Okay. So if you'd like, could we go down the list on those quotes? Because I'd like to hopefully provide some further context to some of those.
Let me
See
just
if,
share the link in the chat here.
perfect. That works great.
I would love to hear your guys' comments on this advocate article. There it is. So on the subject of how is TPUSA dishonest, like no one would ever come out and say, or yet they say it out loud, I think we should stone transgender people to streets. We can talk about how people stoned in the Bible for homosexuality, and we can say that was the perfect law. And that's like the title of this article. You know, those kinds of disingenuous statements that imply something, but don't actually say the thing you're implying. That's the behavior that TPUSA engages in. So we can start whatever you want to start on.
Yes, perfect. I'm still.
I'm looking. I'm having trouble finding the quote. Stone and Gable is God's law, just because that's the first one.
She takes off the Miss Rachel costume and the uniform, etc. And she comes back and she's like, now I'm just talking as Rachel. And she goes, the reason I'm this way is because I'm Christian. And in the Bible, it says, love your neighbor. And really, I approach people in love.
2-minute video.
Oh, shoot. Okay.
From Patriots.
I think at 26 seconds. Hold on.
Let's let her say it. 120. What's going on with that?
Well, let's let her say it. 120. I'll respond, and then I got a dash.
I've shared prayers on here before, and that's because my faith is really important to me.
What do you think when Miss Rachel quotes scripture?
Why I love every neighbor. In Matthew 22, a religious teacher asked,
it does say neighbor.
and Jesus says, God and
first of all, the first part is
the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. There's no greater commandments than these. I believe it's mentioned. So yes, everyone belongs, everyone's welcome, everyone is treated with empathy and respect. It doesn't say love every neighbor.
I want to crack open that.
There are so many reasons I stand strong in love. And with everyone. That's who I am. And the love back and the God bless if you disagree.
Lay with another man shall be stoned to death.
To Jack's point, I'm dying to know, like, what do you think when Miss Rachel quotes scripture in that way? I mean, Satan's.
It doesn't just say love your neighbor, though. It does say love your neighbor, except in a sense.
Yourself, but not totally. You said the first. Let me say the second thing. You love God, love His law. You love.
Here we go, folks.
You love them by telling them the truth, not by confirming or affirming their sin. And it says, by the way, Miss Rachel, you might want to crack open that Bible of yours. In a lesser referenced part of the same part of Scripture is in Leviticus 18, is that thou shalt lay with another man shall be stoned to death. Just saying. So, Miss Rachel, you quote Leviticus 19, love your neighbor as yourself. The chapter before affirms God's perfect law when it comes to sexual matters.
Okay.
Did you guys hear that?
Yeah.
Yes.
I think that's pretty clear what he meant. He's like, well, this if you're gonna quote Leviticus at us, Miss Rachel, I'm gonna quote this other part about stoning gay people. It's like, what are we doing here,
Well,
guys?
I
You
think the
know?
point he was making was that people can cherry pick Bible verses and leave out others that condemn certain activities. So when obviously homosexuality is considered, like practicing homosexuality is considered sinful to the Bible, right? We can agree on that.
Do you think that like he's making that he's like joking about the implication of, well, if you're going to quote scriptures, then I'm going to say it's acceptable to stone gay people. Like he's making that challenge to her. Like
No,
it maybe it's a joke, but like it is that a cool joke to make, you know?
I don't think it's a joke. I think he's pointing out Miss Rachel's lack of understanding of the Old Testament. A lot of people take the Old Testament out of context. Like there's a lot of people that take the slavery out of context, that take this out of context. I mean, we can go into that, of course, but they like to cherry, like Cooper was saying, cherry pick verses where I think the idea that Charlie Kirk was getting at is if you're going to read this verse about love your neighbor as yourself, but the verse before it is about stoning gay people, why are you trying to compare the two? Like why are you taking this message, but then you're leaving out these other ones? I don't think he's calling it God's perfect law like now, but I think he's saying, this was how it was post
Yeah,
Christ.
so in Leviticus, the book of Leviticus is written as the Moses writes this to the tribe of Levi, and the tribe of Levi were the priests of the Jews. The tribe of Levi were kind of God's people, sort of, in a more in a terribly articulated sense. Um, but so when you look at it through that lens, God is setting these laws for the Jewish people at this time. Later, after after the old covenant, which is that, there comes a new covenant, which is Jesus, and through the new covenant, the Levitical laws and the like.
And I was confirmed in the Lutheran Church. You don't have to explain the new
Okay,
covenant to me. Like
perfect.
I
Okay,
know all the stuff, you know.
gotcha.
I think that something that I come across when I have serious discussions with people who I disagree with politically, but I think are earnest about their questions and things is like especially conservatives seem to take every political question as if it's being asked in a vacuum, as if it's being asked in a college poli-sci 101 classroom. Like we're asking like, how do we solve this trolley equation or something? And I think that like I can accept the counter arguments you guys are making for this particular point right now. I disagree, but I hear what you're saying and your logic makes sense if I don't know anything else about Charlie Kirk. But given that I do know all the other stuff that Charlie Kirk has said and done, these comments mean a certain thing to me. And I feel like I know what he meant when he made this joke. To me, it feels like he wants to live in a world where violence against queer people out on the street is an acceptable way to make queer people just go away, like for us to go back into the closet and live in fear all of the time. So that's just how I feel about that. I think we should move on to another one though. And I'll just say I think you guys you're going to continue to I think we're going to continue to like analyze things in a vacuum, but I think if you start to look at the pattern of behavior, you will have to come to some kind of different conclusion about this man eventually. But we can move on to another example down the list if you'd like.
Sure. I'll just say one final thing, um, is that obviously we don't agree with him on everything. So we're not direct mirrors of him. And just for the wider audience watching, Joyce is not a direct reflection of. Well, I guess I shouldn't speak for you, but I would assume you're not a direct mirror of any other political figure out there as well. So don't lump us into any. We're exactly the same as these people.
take such a strong stance and opinion on this.
Okay. Is there any other? I would actually so the article here from Advocate references. Where was it? Where'd it go?
Reality. You not get to determine your own reality. You not get to all of a sudden say, I'm rich or I'm poor. So we actually have to look at the evidence for that. Now some of those are.
I was just gonna go to the next one. This trans people are to blame for inflation. That was the next one we're gonna watch.
Here,
I haven't seen this one actually. I've seen these other ones. I haven't seen this one
Which
before.
one are you looking at, Cooper? I kind of want to go down to the one about trans people are a quote social contagion, but I'd be open to whatever you want to talk about, Cooper.
Oh, I see this one.
Here, okay, we can do that one, and then I also wanted to touch on the quote of that trans people are pure evil, end quote.
If you had a son or a daughter and to you and they said, Charlie, I'm trans, what would be the action in that? Like, would you support them?
If they came out as trans, no, honey, you're a girl, or no, my son, you're. I don't affirm delusions. Do not affirm what is harmful or what is not true, and you must find the underlying issue as this is happening. 75% of minors that are trans are girls. 75%. Largely found because of social contagions of young ladies that are on the autism spectrum that most times are having puberty anxiety and are being bullied or feel self-conscious for changes that are happening to their body.
Did you get that very well, Cooper? I don't know if you heard that or if you're watching it yourself.
I heard it.
Okay. Let me go back to where he says social contagion. I can't. Gosh dang. So he doesn't call transgenders a social contagion. He says it's a social contagion to bully autistic
Young women have been more prone to social contagions, and transgenderism is a social contagion. That's a quote in the second paragraph under the goes on to 1,000% increase in transgenderism is well, everybody is an extra on our nation's youth. I don't believe there's any data to support that 5,000% number. I believe he just pulled that straight out of his ass. I also believe that any data that shows there's an increase in trans or queer people over the last 50 years is evidence of social acceptance for those people and the ability of those people to live more openly and to answer more honestly when they are polled for such things. Similar to how there are more left-handed people now than there were in 1950, because for some idiotic reason there was a stigma for being left-handed in the past, and people were literally, my father was beaten by his school teachers for trying to write with his left hand when he was a child. And he had to write with his right hand. And they just don't do that anymore. So now there are more left-handed people. And the same thing is happening with queer people. It's simply become more socially acceptable to come out of the closet. And so more people are being open about it. And even if young people are experimenting with things in general, there is no easy or quick way for a young person to receive any kind of medication or surgery that would be damaging to them term. Getting delusional adults who there's always delusional abusing their children with being trans in general. But yeah, Charlie here, he calls it a social contagion. He's alluding to the idea that the entire concept of being transgender is made up, that it's just completely made up. They will also say the same thing about every other queer identity, that it's just a completely made up thing that doesn't exist. And if we just follow Jesus hard enough, we can get rid of it. We can stamp it out. I debated some horrible incels on Twitter a while back who insisted the same thing. They literally said to me, I think transgenderism was invented 15 to 20 years ago, and it didn't exist before then, which is just insane. It's absolutely insane. If you do 10 minutes of Googling, you should know that there's always been sort of intersex and transgender people in society, and that the
You could just
words
look
of
at Caitlyn Jenner.
yeah, I mean, the words that we use to describe these people have changed over the course of history, but there are well-documented instances of people throughout history who have been some sort of transgender. And it's if we have a little grace to let people live the lives in the historical time period they existed in, I think we can see clearly that it's just one part of our big queer family. It's not a big deal. I encourage people to look up the social public friend, the universal public friend was a person who lived in New England in colonial times, who was allowed to change their gender and just be a gender neutral person in colonial New England before the Revolution, I believe, living in like a Quaker society or something. Transgender people have always existed and they always will. And some people act like if they just put us all on an island, it would go away or something. Yeah.
Yeah, so I've actually talked to quite a few pastors about this because it's a very interesting idea. The idea that gender dysphoria, transgenders aren't real is, I mean, I would agree that's a myth. I mean, obviously, real people, it's a real issue, but from a Christian perspective, I see it. Obviously, the Bible. That's how I base my life, and I believe that Cooper and Riker boat. Um, it's like any other sin, and so say you're transgender, like terrible, horrible, and coming from a Christian, somewhat ignorant because I mean we all struggle with our own sins. I mean, it's no different than a porn addiction, a usury addiction, gluttony, whatever. But it is still a sin. So if you come to me and you're like, hey, I want to be a Christian, but I am attracted to the same sex, or I want to be a different gender, that would be my answer. Is that it is in my worldview still a sin, but it's a real thing. It's a real issue. To pretend that it's not is ignorant. But I mean, again, like I said, it's no different than any other sin that people struggle with.
Can I ask you a clarifying question?
Sure.
What about being transgender specifically is the sin? Is it like, so transgender person would say that like when I was growing up, I innately knew that like I appear like I'm a man, but I feel in the inside like I'm a woman.
Mhm.
So there's that person, but then there's also a person who's further along that journey who has completely transitioned and is living that life as a woman. But let's say that there's two timelines where the trans person has transitioned and the timeline where the person hasn't transitioned. Both of those people are still transgender. What is these two people's sin?
Well, so I'll give you,
That's
there's two things there. So first of all, obviously there's going to be feminine men and masculine women. I mean, I work with a couple women in my job, and they're extremely masculine, but they still are women. You know what I mean? And then there's going to be men who are feminine.
sure.
That's fine. I mean, there's going to be it's always a spectrum. It's never you have to be a manly man or a womanly woman. But then the sin is you're going against God's design. God said, "I'm making you a man," and you're going innately against it. And then also in the Bible, I mean, the whole point is, a man and a woman are supposed to become one, just like Jesus
Whoa,
was
whoa,
with
whoa,
the
whoa,
church.
whoa, whoa. Hold on, let me stop you for a second.
But yeah, go ahead.
I've got two trans people here. One has transitioned and the other has not. Let's assume that the person who hasn't transitioned is a God-fearing Christian
Mhm.
and understands their feelings from within, but is choosing not to act on them. But they still feel
Mhm.
that way constantly. It's like they cannot help it. Where's the sin? They
I
just
mean,
feel
I could, I
are
would,
you?
I would love to
they're
chime in
trying to
here.
live a godly life, but they understand they are that way. And like for the purpose of this argument right now, we're assuming that this specific trans person accepts that they feel this way and just is going to live quote unquote normally in a Christian life, so that they're not transitioning. Where is that person's sin?
I would love to chime in here if you'd allow me to.
Yeah.
So the so we have to understand that temptation itself is not a sin, but it is the acting upon the temptation that is the sin, and that is made clear throughout the Bible. Jesus was tempted in the wilderness for 40 days, right? So, in the most basic bit of Christian theology is that Jesus was sinless. So, if Jesus was tempted and he was sinless, then we can deduce that temptation is not a sin. So in that scenario where you have those two trans people, one person doesn't act on it and one person does act on it. The one that did act on it acted against God's design, and the one that didn't act on it didn't act against God's design. So the sin is the acting upon it. Like, I have an innate drive to want to have as much sex with as much attractive women as possible, right? However, I need to pick up my cross and deny myself every single time I see an attractive woman, because my God says that that is a sin, and I have to deny myself in order to remain as sinless as possible. Obviously, I will stumble, right? And that's the wonderful thing about God, is that even if we do stumble, He's right there to pick us back up again, and we can try again. So I guess the answer to your question is the acting upon it becomes the sin, not the temptation of it itself.
So this is identical to the Latter-day Saints Church, the Mormon Church's philosophy on human sexuality, which is that if you simply deny yourself, any of the same things that a straight person would have in life, like a partner or a family, or sex for pleasure outside of having children, even with the person that you're just married to. These things are just like, you just cannot do any of these things, or you could like be in a straight relationship with a person that you're not innately attracted to, and that's sort of an acceptable way to sort of propose that queer people live. Like, it's a sort of abstinence. Is that like a sort of a good like summation of your position?
I would add on to it by saying that God calls people to be single. God called Paul to be single. And He does give us all sex drives, right? But and sex is a beautiful thing in the context of a marriage. But He calls people to be single if he deems it that way. If that's the cross that person has to bear, which is totally fine. But He also calls people to do all sorts of different things, to bear all sorts of different crosses throughout their life. So I have an urge to watch porn, but just because I have that urge doesn't mean that I give into it and masturbate, because if I did, that would be a sin. And just because there is that urge within me to do that doesn't mean that I always have to give into it. In order to be a Christian, we are called to pick up our cross daily and to deny our flesh so that we can produce fruit of the Spirit.
So let's make a distinction now between accepting that queer people exist and that trans people exist, and that there is a school of thought within Christianity that will allow queer people to exist in an abstinence fashion on some level. Now let's sort of square that with Charlie Kirk's words about how transgenderism is a social contagion. Like, is this something that is being taught to people, or is this something that is innate in people that cannot be helped? Because Charlie Kirk is of the opinion that this is like a political movement that, if properly suppressed, can be like stamped out and ended. Like, he's in a group of people that think we can make a world where there are no transgender people anymore.
I don't know if that is. I don't think that was his position. I think that when he called it a social contagion, I think he would have applied that to any sort of sin, whether that be lying or murder or anything in between those two very opposite ends of a sinful spectrum. So just because he says that this particular sin is a social contagion, I don't think he expects that there is a final like result that we can get to where that social contagion doesn't exist this side of heaven, because the world is sinful. Charlie Kirk believed that. Christians believe that. So as long as we're on this earth, there are always going to be quote social contagions.
I mean, I can appreciate that logic, but like the idea of like separating Charlie Kirk's words from like the earthly realm and the heavenly realm, he's the leader of a political organization that seeks to have influence in politics, like he is
It's not all
trying.
he did, though.
But he was trying to influence and control the earthly kingdom of things, like with these ideas. So it's not like he's like I mean, that's what Jesus was himself, was sort of like I don't really care what Pontius Pilate or these guys are up to, they have their things and we have our things, and they're sort of completely separate. Like he didn't want Christians to be involved in government. He wanted them to be like of heaven and not of worldly things, So like it's
To
I
some
think
extent.
it's kind of splitting hairs to be like, oh, Charlie Kirk was talking about there won't be trans people in heaven. It's like, well, he's doing things and people are voting for things to restrict our civil rights here in real time now, you know. Um,
I think there will be people who have a desire to be trans in heaven, just so we're aware. And I think Charlie Kirk believed the same thing. If you want to call that person a trans person, I guess I don't know where you make the distinction. I guess what is your definition of a trans person? Is it somebody who acts upon that desire to change their gender, or is it somebody who just has the desire itself?
Well, I'm sure that trans people themselves would have a much better answer to this question than I am ever going to be able to answer. But I would just say that any person that says they are a part of the idea of being transgender right now, which means that you are either a person who feels those things inside of you and understands that about yourself, or that you are on that somewhere further along that journey where you've completely transitioned and you're living as that person that you have felt inside. It's that whole spectrum.
So there's
Gotcha.
somebody, so like just for clarification here, like somebody that socially transitions, like a man who socially transitions as a woman, but maybe not like physically undergoes surgery, they'd still be considered like a trans individual. Just to like clarify.
It's not like considered, like that's the thing, is like it's a little more nuanced than that, because every day, I guarantee you, every week maybe, you both of you are out in the world and you see a trans person and you simply do not know that they are trans because they pass as heteronormative so well that you don't register them at all. They just look like a man or they look like a woman. And there's people that don't pass as well, and those people who pass so well that you don't even notice, that is a transgender man or that is a transgender woman. But they're just, it's just the social context. If you don't pass as well, like people will ask you more questions. If you pass perfectly well as a straight heteronormative person, nobody's ever going to bother you about it. It's like it's very nuanced, and like it's almost like a pointless question to ask. Well, what is like, how would you consider each individual person? Like, it's kind of, it's at some point, science fails to label things on an individual basis. Like there's a definition of a fish or something out there that, there's a funny philosophy joke about like grass is like a tree or something, they're the same thing, like in science or something in the same class.
How like
It's
a tomato is a fruit sort of thing.
Exactly. Yeah, it's almost pointless to ask the questions in this way. Like we should have a little more grace for people living in the real world to understand these things. Um,
I was only asking for the definition, like for this case, like
yeah,
for
yeah,
your
yeah.
personal like idea of it. That was my only clarifying
Hope I
question.
answered it. I hope I answered your question.
It did. And so I guess my question, just to go over this statement one more time, what's the part of it that I guess really I don't have a great word for it. Like, what's the part that bothers you the most? Like the part that he's saying that transgender is a social contagion.
I mean, again, as a person who has studied political science and American history and queer history, um, in particular around the Holocaust and everything that happened in the Holocaust to queer people, and the things that the Nazis said and did to scapegoat and vilify transgender people and queer people before the Holocaust happened, along with Jews and other people that were sent to camps. All of the same things that they're saying about trans people today are literally exactly the same things that the Nazis said about queer people leading up to the Holocaust. Every single one of them is like cut and paste right from the Nazi playbook. This idea that being queer is just a social contagion, like it's just a fad that was invented 15 years ago. That's literally a thing Nazis said about queer people. There was a one of the first things that the Nazis did when they came to power was there was an institute in Berlin called the Institute of Sexology, which sounds silly, but they were really pioneers in the science of human sexuality and trying to like figure out what was going on with human sexuality. And this Institute of Sexology in Berlin became a safe haven for queer people and for transgender people. And the professor who was in charge of it was like a prolific uh, academic in Berlin. And the very first thing that the Nazis did when they came to power in the election, where they first came to power in a supermajority in Germany, was they sent their stormtroopers out and they burned down the Institute of Sexology, and they had a book burning in the street. They burned every book in the building. The guy had to like flee the country, and a couple people were killed. It was like a big like lynching riot, and they were burning books about queer people because in order to spread Nazi ideology about, oh, this is made up, you have to have a population of people who are completely ignorant about the science and history of queer people, who don't understand that there's always been queer and trans people and there always will be. It's not a fad, it's not an ideology that can be ended with social and political repression. And that's what Charlie Kirk believes. He believes it's a social contagion. He believes it's a fad, a narrative, or if he doesn't actually believe that, that's just what he says because he wants his political movement to scapegoat queer people as a convenient political football for his side to maintain political power. It's not even that some of these conservative people believe these things. It's just a football for them to use to maintain their political power.
I can't necessarily speak exactly for what Charlie Kirk believes, but I guess I'll tell you to summarize, to kind of sum this one up so we can move on to the next one, for me at least. Obviously, I believe that trans people are real. I think that it's an issue that people struggle with for sure. But I do see it as a sin. And so just like drinking until you're blackout drunk, whatever you would consider a social contagion or something that probably shouldn't be doing, but it's socially acceptable because people want to live in their sin. It's something that's going to happen. But if you come to me and you say, "How am I going to get to the kingdom of God as a trans person?" I think Cooper put it as well as you can. So
We can move on to the next one if you like.
yeah,
Perfect.
hold up here.
Okay,
Which one do you want to talk about? Yeah.
Yeah, there was one that I wanted to talk about. This was one that I had never seen before. It's like the second from the last on the Advocate article. It's the Amane Caliph and trans people are pure evil.
Okay.
That's one that I had never seen before. I feel like the article gets it wrong pretty blatantly, because when you look at the post, he says the entire ideology is pure evil, but he says the Advocate article says that he called Imam Khalif and trans people pure evil. That's just one that I saw that I was like, oh, okay. I would hear your insights on that, Joyce, if you have that.
Yeah, let me pull up the full post. It wasn't sure the whole thing.
I mean, if we're debating logic and like semantics, I'd have to concede your point that he's calling the entire ideology pure evil. But it's about this particular trans person. I don't know, like to call again to call the ideology of transgender people evil, but not trans people evil, you're again, that's like acting as though they're two different things, as though like there is an ideology, a political narrative or something that is like independent of trans people and is being like pushed onto people, even by like naive people who don't understand that it's like not real or something, like it's a what do you call it? Like a group hysteria or something. Like that's the implication. So like I don't know, like again, I feel like we're splitting hairs. Like if that's the point you want to make, that like maybe he didn't exactly call them pure evil, like okay, I don't know.
I would just kind of I'd like to add then that when like articles like this, so for me, making that distinction is important because there are ideologies that I would consider to be pure evil, like Nazism or anything like akin to that, white supremacy, right, black supremacy, any like racial supremacy thing that advocates for the destruction of other races, um, any of these things. I would consider them to be pure evil, but I wouldn't consider the individuals that fall under that ideology to be pure evil, right? Like there were Nazis that were not pure evil, even though that they were like soldiers in the Nazi army, right? Many of them would consider themselves Nazis, but they don't. A lot of them, didn't. They were drafted into this war. They were born on a farm. They have no idea what's going on in Berlin and Krakow and all these things. And they're like, oh, our this guy's pretty charismatic. Yeah, I'd consider myself a Nazi. Those people do exist, right? So we have to and it kind of goes to your good Germans point, where I think your contention with that does have credence, but it also I feel like lacks the full sight of the scope of kind of putting all of the uh, throwing the baby out with the bathwater, basically. Like making this large distinction and saying that they're all bad, rather than that some people are either misinformed or or they're ignorant about the goings on of that ideology. So I would like to just kind of clarify that.
Sure.
And
I
I
have
would,
but go ahead, Caleb. Yeah.
yeah, just really quick, just to kind of add on to what Cooper was saying, I think kind of putting it blatantly, the idea of lumping everybody into a category, whether it be all liberals are socialist America haters or all Republicans or fascist Nazis, I think that's always incredibly dangerous. No matter what context it's in, lumping everybody into one category just dehumanizes people in general. So I'll let you go ahead and reply.
So have you guys ever heard of the phrase like the banality of evil? Like that evil is banal.
Mm-mm.
I have not.
So it's sort of this idea that like evil is not like a James Bond supervillain. Like James Evil is not like a mustache twirling guy standing over a damsel in distress tied up on railroad tracks. Like evil is ignorance. Evil is laziness. Evil is apathy. Um, Hitler was only able to do what he did because of all of the ignorant farmers that you just mentioned who didn't understand jack about shit and just went along with what ended up being a Holocaust of more than 6 million people.
I agree with you.
And so
I agree.
I would counter your argument that it's not fair to hold people to that account. And as a communist, I believe we have a social responsibility to each other as human beings that is more important than anything else. I truly believe we are responsible for each other, that we are a village, and that it takes a village to take care of all of us. Every child is my child, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that the idea that like I can't hold those individuals accountable for being ignorant, the whole system from a historical materialist analysis, from a Marxist analysis, comes to the conclusion that those people are ignorant because of the way the power structure is set up, because of the way that capitalism works to keep people ignorant and apathetic and lazy, and that these sentiments among people are the result of material conditions and not objective mythological factors that just spring out of something natural or good or moral that can be found in the Bible or something. Like, I truly think that our responsibility to each other includes the responsibility to call out the ignorant farmer who's just going along with fascism and to be hostile to those people, to not let them wallow in apathy and laziness and ignorance, but to be hostile in a way that calls them in instead of calling them out. Like I'm challenging you guys today on multiple accounts. I'm not like yelling at you, but I'm also like, in my opinion, I'm not being easy on you about the things that you believe.
I would hope not.
Um, people, I do not believe that these ideas should go unchallenged. And when for some reason, I lay in wait. I wait for someone to do something racist or sexist around me or homophobic, and it almost never happens to me in public, probably because I'm 6.5 feet tall, and I pass as like a straight white man. So like I never see those kinds of things the way that like a black person or a woman would say that sexist or racist things happen to them very frequently. And so like I truly believe that when these things happen, we should have a society and a culture that is actively looking for antisocial, anti sort of village mentality where like I expect that not only do I have a responsibility to other people, but I expect you to have a responsibility to other people and to behave in a certain way. And I think that conservatism and even liberalism allows individuals under capitalism to sort of exist in a way that doesn't expect much of other people. And I think that goes deeper to the definition of evil and like what I see as like the actual problem than like what I think the narrative you were just giving. Probably
Gotcha.
pretty far off topic. What were we were talking about this?
No. I appreciate you saying all the things that you just said, because I largely agree with you in the fact that we should challenge our beliefs and we should have do what we're doing right now, right, which is talking to one another and challenging what each of us believe in, so that we can hopefully get to some approximation of the truth. And if
I haven't heard from Riker in a while.
He's a little under the weather. I don't know if he's.
he is sick
Yeah,
right now.
I am just going through it right now.
But yeah. So I appreciate you saying what you said. I think my contention there though is I guess when we use the word evil, that does invoke with, I feel like, the majority of people who speak English, the far side of the spectrum of that, like the Hitler, right? I think we could both agree that Hitler was more evil than the farmer, right, in this scenario. Um, or would you agree with that statement?
See, I think it's a moot question to ask who was more evil. I think the evil happened, and I'll just repeat again that I think Hitler was only able to do what he was able to do because of the unwashed, apathetic, ignorant masses who went along with what he was doing, or had economic incentives to go along with what he was doing, and valued the economic incentives more than the things that were going on in their country. People on my side of the political spectrum would say right now in this country, there are concentration camps filled with people who are being denied due process, being collected by ICE agents, and that's very analogous to what was going on in Nazi Germany before the outbreak of World War II, even with Jews and other undesirable people being collected in foreign camps, in foreign prisons, along with prisons inside the country. Like it's hard not to draw comparisons between what's happening now and the sort of McCarthy-esque sort of rounding up of people and the scapegoating of people that's happening right now.
maybe that's another topic that we can dive into. Or am I being heard at the moment?
You're a little quiet, but
Okay, I'm looking at my mic volume. It keeps just going down. Like I set it at 80, like it just ticked down to 79. I really have
yeah, I'm
absolutely
just
no
turning you
idea
down.
what's going on, but sorry about that. I'll figure that out at some point. I really have zero idea why it's doing that. But if that's a topic that we want to go into, the ICE detention centers and I guess maybe ICE as a whole and everything like that, we could certainly do that as well. I know that's something that I feel like we're probably pretty in touch with.
I mean, I'm your guest here. If you have questions, I will answer your questions.
Yeah,
Uh,
I guess first, how recent is right now when you say like these ICE detention centers are rounding up people, these ICE agents are rounding up people? How current is right now?
I literally mean this very moment. Like,
How 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 far back does that go for you? Like,
I mean, ICE is only as old as 2003. I think that I have a severe distrust of all law enforcement in the United States. And I think that, there's an argument to be made that like law enforcement is constantly doing something that I think is extrajudicial or unconstitutional. But like I think that like President Obama was doing things that were deplorable. Joe Biden was deporting people from ICE, and there's got to be examples of like under Joe Biden and Obama and George Bush of ICE kidnapping people maybe outside of the bounds of a judicial warrant, and deporting somebody extrajudicially and just sort of getting away with it because the system is too big and it's just one in a million. So I think that that's sort of like happening normally all the time. But I think that Donald Trump campaigned on the promise of deporting 3 million people in 1 year and just doing it almost arbitrarily. There's the reporting about Stephen Miller going into a meeting with ICE people and screaming at them, like, why aren't you at Home Depot? Just pick up anybody who's brown at a Home Depot. They must be illegal. Like Stephen Miller is a frothing at the mouth white supremacist. And he is because Donald Trump is basically like a dementia-ridden idiot who doesn't have any values of his own. His advisors are basically running the country. And so people like Stephen Miller have an outsized influence over the government right now. And he's just an out and out white supremacist.
yeah,
So I do think that ICE, like, so that my answer to the question is Donald Trump has like, he's made it a thing to like, he's made ICE's entire purpose to be like extrajudicially deporting people from the country.
yeah, that's the only reason I was asking is for the consistency of we've had other presidents, Biden, Obama, that have been deporting. I mean, Obama was the deporter in chief. I mean, what 10 million or over 10 million deportations under Obama.
Not a Democrat. So, yeah.
Yep, yeah, which is very, very consistent. So I guess go ahead.
Could I ask a question?
Go ahead.
So you liken what you're seeing now to what you or what the world saw in Germany in the 1930s, right? I guess how do you reconcile the two being comparable? I just like to kind of hear your justification for that.
Elaborate on that question because I do think they're comparable. Like I don't think I think it's objectively comparable. I think everything about it, like you could say, like name a thing ICE is doing, the Nazis did that. Like what do you think that ICE is doing is not like Nazi Germany? Like
I mean, like starving people and forcing them to mine coal and
there is reporting right now that people who are in ICE detention facilities are not receiving food for like weeks at a time. They're being given like low level, like a bit of water, but they're just like not being given food. The food that they're being given is rotten, like bread with mold. Rotten meat is being given them to eat. Have you read anything about that?
I mean, no, but I find that very hard to believe. Mainly because the cheapest bread out there doesn't rot until like months after its shelf life.
Yes. Well, when you're running a concentration camp where your goal is to ethnically cleanse Latino people from the United States, you don't really care if they live or die.
I mean, wouldn't there be? I mean, wouldn't there obviously be um, graves or
There are over 1,000 unreported deaths or unconfirmed, like people are completely missing from the ICE detention system who are either people who were going through the documented process of like trying to become an American citizen, or they are American citizens and they have simply gone missing in the ICE detention facilities. They could still be alive, it's very like please like stop for a second and just listen to the words that are coming out of your mouth. The question you just asked me was, wouldn't there be graves? Like, can you imagine asking yourself that of the Nazi regime in 1929? Like where like
but there
oh
were though.
they're kidnapping Jews, but where are the graves? It's like I mean,
Or but
what are
wouldn't
we
there
doing
also
here?
wouldn't there be human ashes falling out of the sky, right? Wouldn't there be or whatever, right? I mean,
Not if they're
I
not burning people yet, like they're not like cremating people yet. They could just be putting people in mass graves off camera right now. Like we have no idea.
I feel like that's a very far jump in reasoning, though. I mean,
I'm
isn't
not
it
saying we
more?
have evidence of those things. I'm saying we do have evidence of people in these camps not receiving food, and that they are they're either in conditions which are so hot and they don't have any air conditioning, or they're in freezing conditions and they have no blankets or shelter. They're just like in cages in big rooms, in buildings that are not meant to like house people. Those
Uh,
are easily like identifiable facts that you can go and Google right now.
I wonder what you believe the percentage of detainees like are living in those conditions is.
I have no idea. There are literally tens of thousands of people in detention facilities across the country right now. I would imagine that most of them are not comfortable.
Right. I mean, yeah, I would definitely imagine they're not comfortable.
What percentage of people living in those conditions is acceptable to you?
As close to zero as possible. Like that. That's
Good
obviously
answer.
what that's
Good
that's
answer.
obviously what I want.
I,
But
ICE doesn't care about keeping that number low. I would encourage you to go look into those reporting, please.
yes, and I've seen I've seen reporting on the contrary, and maybe that's just because I get a different news feed than you do, but I've seen wonderful conditions in certain camps and jail-like conditions in other camps, which I think uh, you know jail-like conditions is the bare minimum of what I should be providing for detainees. Space to somewhat move around, meals, and a place to sleep. And I'm curious also as to what you believe, like how long these people, excuse me, are staying there, and then getting deported. Or do you believe they're being deported?
I mean, I've read a bunch of different reports. People are deported almost immediately. And then I've heard reports of people, US citizens, being held in camps for like months at a time, up to like 9 months or a year. So like people are just like, it's completely random. It doesn't seem like ICE has a plan. It seems like they're deporting anyone that they can logistically deport because their individual situation allows them to be deported, and anyone else they're just uh, containing arbitrarily, keeping in camps as long as they could possibly do. There's a phrase among some people, activists, that goes, the pain is the point. Like their object is to cause pain and to inflict like trauma on these people and to just make being an immigrant in this country a miserable, fearful experience. And so that's the point. Like the point is to just like throw people in prison and make them go through the jail process, even if they don't know that they've committed any crime. There's people in Minnesota who were arrested because they were just like near a protest. There was an account of a guy who was arrested at a protest in Minnesota, thrown into a jail, and flown to like San Diego or Texas or something, and then just like released on the streets with no phone or clothes into the winter night, of Texas or wherever he was. That's not something that a government that is respecting people's due process rights would do. That's something that someone who is a government that's trying to terrorize people would do.
Gotcha. So from what I've seen is the vast majority of legal citizens who are detained by ICE are, and I have yet to see even one example of this not occurring, are released after 48 hours, which is in compliance with federal law. Because if you are suspected of committing a crime, you can be detained legally for 48 hours until and once that time is up, you have to be let go. So if you have any sources or anything of an overreach of that, I certainly would appreciate being enlightened on that. But I have yet to see any of that.
I mean, I don't have the source in front of me, but I'll just again repeat the example of the guy who was like a United States citizen from Minnesota who was just taken to Texas or San Antonio or something, and like left on the streets somewhere. That cannot be the first time that has happened to someone. They're doing this to multiple people who are just being taken and imprisoned for the purpose of terrorizing them and interrupting their life, so that they have to go through a court process. I have personally been arrested in Omaha for free speech activity that is just objectively stupid to be charging me with the things I was charged with. They're dismissed in court, but the police's intent was just to make me go through 9 months of a court process and hire an attorney to waste my money. The state knows how to inflict pain on people who are its political dissidents, and it does this in different ways. And ICE is doing this to all kinds of people.
Gotcha.
So the couple of numbers I just looked up, this is a PBS report. I don't know if you take that as official or not. But they said in January of 26, there were 7,252 people who had been held for longer than 6 months. But in that report, it says, so when ICE, from my understanding, when I was doing research on this a couple months ago, when ICE detains somebody, if they've been in the country illegally for longer than 2 years, they do get due process, like they have to see a judge. And this says in this report that those 7,252 people that are requiring those people to see a judge. And so they say that when the Trump administration was offering plane fare for $2,600 for people who would leave the country voluntarily, Hernandez, who's one of the victims of this extra long hold, was told that they couldn't leave until they got their due process, until they saw a judge. So I guess my question is, do we want due process for all of these legal immigrants who have been here for less than 2 years, going against our federal code, which would just prolong them in these camps longer, or should we just deport them quickly and efficiently instead of making them wait multiple months?
So I don't think that any of these people have been, or many of these people have been detained reasonably at all. Just there's always going to be, and it would be incredibly easy for ICE to go down to one prosecutor in one place and be like, hey, do this one way, and then use that as an example of like, hey, we did this the right way for this one guy, therefore everything's fine. Even though like what's in question is maybe not, there's always going to be an individual example of how someone got their due process rights. I'm not saying 100% of people are having their due process rights violated. The system is always trying its best to make it look like it's functioning properly. The judges and the prosecutors are all doing their hardest to make it look like the criminal justice system has some semblance of viability or authority at this point, even though they're so backlogged and there's like, the wait list for judges and things like that is so absurd and ridiculous that you could question whether or not it's reasonable to have people going through this system in the first place. But the idea that like here in Omaha, there were just 2 people taken by ICE from the courthouse the other day, and then like immediately deported. I believe they were immediately deported to someplace not here. And those people were both in court for something like, one was like a DUI or something, and I forget what the other one was for. But they were sort of both crimes that you're like, oh, like this person should be facing some kind of jail time for the crime they're committing. But now they were literally taken from court, and instead of the people who they committed the crime against here in Nebraska receiving some kind of justice for that crime, they're just gone. And who knows if the people where they went to are going to actually prosecute them for anything, or if they're just going to be released onto the streets of some foreign country that didn't want them. And that is that due process. Like, I think there's a lot more examples right now of like ICE interrupting the due process in that way, than there is of like, I'll fully admit that that one guy you just mentioned got his due process, and he should be like deported under the current rules. But even on top of that, I don't believe the current set of rules are honest or are earnest for people to be coming into this country anyway. I think Republicans and Democrats have created a system of immigration that is so arduous and stupid, that it's impossible to come through in any reasonable manner of time. They won't fund the number of judges that would get people through the system. You can have people that go through the system, and like if they just had like all of the officials and bureaucrats lined up in a row to check the paperwork like one at a time and get them through everything in one day, the person would be approved to enter the country and start working. But it just takes 20 years to do it. And so like this whole system has created a problem, and the Republican Party doesn't want to fund it, or frankly anything else that the government does. And so they defund these programs, and then they say, look, this program doesn't work. Therefore, now we have to put a bunch of people in camps and have a huge deportation police state machine. And it's just bullshit from top to bottom. And it deserves no respect at all. Like, I appreciate the argument that you guys are making, and I agree that guy you just mentioned, he got his due process, he should be deported under the current rules, whatever. But it's all a fallacy and a farce from the beginning. And like it's all stupid, and doesn't the immigration laws don't serve people in a way that would allow them to immigrate into this country honestly and efficiently in the first place. So there's no point in arguing about, well, should he be held in a concentration camp or a really nice jail camp? Because no, like none of this should be happening on its face.
Well, so let me clarify my original statement. There's multiple testimonies in here. I was just reading that first one. It's 7,252 people that are required to go see a judge because they've been here for longer than 2 years. That was the number. So there's almost 7,300 of them. As Let me address the drunk driver one from Omaha. So if we take that in a vacuum, which I know, the vacuum, but like, so we're just going to take this one example of this drunk driver in Omaha. It can go for any immigrant for any crime, whether it's rape or they're bringing drugs, or maybe they didn't commit a crime at all. We'll take this DUI charge. To me, personally, it is more, there's more justice being dished out to somebody getting deported for a crime rather than using my taxpayer money to go sit in a jail and then get released a couple months later and then go commit a different crime, go commit a different DUI. If you take a more serious crime like rape, they shouldn't have even been here in the first place. Like they shouldn't be here. And now that they are here and they're committing these crimes, like I want them gone. And then I think your last thing was the idea that we just have like too many, like we're kind of in this like panic mode of like we have too many people and we're like turning into this police state. I think that's the fault of Joe Biden letting in millions and millions of illegal immigrants. We can't go back on that. We have to have a solution. We can't just let them sit here. I think there was a statistic that came out in 24 where one in every three immigrants is committing some sort of crime that is either drug related, sex related, or minor related. And I mean, that to me, that's
That's
very
not,
bad.
that's one third of them. That's not true at all. I mean, the
It's
immigrants,
like a crime
immigrants,
day.
I mean, the data that I am aware of says that immigrants commit less crimes than American citizens, and I don't believe that one third of Americans are committing those crimes.
Well,
Uh,
I think that's a per capita number though. If you have 1 million people versus 10 million people,
I mean, again, like we're
I
creating
can try to find it.
the global system of capitalism creates poverty, and poverty creates all of these other inherent problems and moral degeneracy amongst regular people. because they're all struggling to just survive and they have no values beyond consumerism and individualism. Um, we can debate like whether or not rapists should be allowed in the country or something all day long. I think that like our prison system is a for-profit prison system. Trump is paid and his campaign is financed by for-profit prisons. They're making profits off of sending these immigrants into these facilities and filling these facilities up. It's just a grift from top to bottom. There's no justice in it. There's no reason or logic to it. They're not fixing the immigration system so that it works better, so that people can immigrate to the United States. I'll repeat again. I believe that they are committing an ethnic cleansing of the United States of Latino people. And I do believe that related to the other things we talked about with TPUSA and Charlie Kirk, I do believe they want to expand that ethnic cleansing to queer people and to Black people if they push the Overton window far enough. I do believe that is their end goal. I believe that the connections to the comparisons between Nazi Germany and this MAGA ideology are such that it's impossible to ignore what the end result of this political movement is. It's either we get rid of these people, we force them to leave, or once that doesn't work, we try something else. And the something else is going to be more sinister.
Gotcha. Okay. I have a statistic here. I'd be curious to hear your response to this. So this is
Can you share it in the chat?
Yes, absolutely. Hold on. Okay. So this is the House Committee on Budget. This is in 2024.
Yeah, January of 24.
January 24. So if you scroll kind of to the bottom ish, not the sources, but in the conclusion here, in the second paragraph here is kind of the it should start with we estimate that 59%. This was a something that this is I think the biggest reason as to why I do not support illegal immigration, because it does create a fiscal drain on America.
Just a moment.
Yeah, take your time. And I guess even that first paragraph of the conclusion too, offers some good insight as to I guess my position on illegal immigration just a little bit more clearly. Like this is kind of the reason as to why I am against it and in support of deportations.
So my gut reaction is to say that all of this report is from a guy who works for the Center for Immigration Studies. I don't know anything about this guy or that center that he works for. I don't know.
It looks like he's the director of research at the Center of Immigration Studies. And this was for the Immigration Integrity, Security, and Enforcement Subcommittee of the House Judiciary Committee on the hearing entitled "The Impact of Illegal Immigration on Social Services." I feel like that's a pretty good source. If you disagree, that's obviously your opinion, and you are very much entitled to that.
So I think that like just reading through this, at the local level, the largest single cost is for public education. Um, Personally, I think that like it says that we estimate the cost of educating the children of illegal immigrants, most of whom are U.S. born, totals $69 billion per year. Um, so I think that it's very interesting to like in one breath say it costs too much to educate children of illegal immigrants, and then to also in another paragraph say they would pay more in taxes if they were more educated. Which he literally in the first paragraph he says, and then in the second one he's talking about the cost of it. So like I think that like I think it seems to me like he's probably like cherry picking like a big number on education that we could in theory say is immigrants using in education funding. And that's something that's like keeping the lights on, like, oh, an immigrant went to this school, and so now I'm going to include the electricity bill for the entire year in this number. And it's like, is that fair? I think that there's like a little bit of fudging going on there to make this claim. Because I do believe that I've heard a lot of data about like the taxes that immigrants do pay in. Like they're not receiving Social Security benefits, they're not receiving Medicare or Medicaid benefits. There's so many federal social programs that they do not receive any benefits from, even if they do receive $69 billion in quote unquote public education funds every year that are probably also going to the children of citizens, at the exact same time. Um, I think that's maybe what's happening there. I'll just say that, like, if I accept this is true, that immigrants do take more from the economy than they give, like, it seems a little dishonest. I mean, I guess maybe I haven't read the full article that he's written here, but I think he
Yeah,
needs
there's a
to.
lot above it as well. There's a
Yeah,
whole bunch.
I would be curious to know if he answers the question, when do you start contributing, in taxes? Like at what point in your journey to
Yeah.
becoming a citizen? And then does he have any recommendations about like how we could make the naturalization process faster so that people become more integrated? Or is his solution to the problem, again, to just deport people because the system as is doesn't work well enough? Like
Yeah,
it's
yeah. I
he's
get
like
your
begging the question almost. Like
sure. Yeah, I get your contention. I would just say though that and there is a graph here, which it's kind of funny. Your shirt says some college, and on this graph, or not graph, rather, this table above, kind of the colored graph. If you scroll up a bit,
yeah.
um,
Some college. There it is.
yep.
That's exactly the premise of this shirt, and the name of my podcast is like
Oh, really?
and that some college demographic on things like this.
Oh, cool.
I have not
That's
graduated college. I would be in that demographic if they were talking about me. That's the premise of the shirt. Yeah.
gotcha. Cool. Um, but yeah, that appears to be where kind of the in between high school only and some college there, that's where that cutoff of drain comes from. Um, uh, the
He does go over
on the very
here.
right hand side of that table, it's the fiscal impact of illegal immigrants. Um, Looks like higher than a bachelor's degree contribute 1.6 thousand, bachelor's degree 6.5, some college 4.8, high school only negative 14.1, and less than high school negative 50.7. And I guess my main contention here is that if we as United States citizens have to pay for the education of somebody who came here illegally, cut in line, did things in an unfair manner, in my opinion, I don't agree with that concept. I don't agree with forcing somebody with the threat of throwing them in prison to pay for that child's ability to go to public school. I can't reconcile that. So that's my main contention, I suppose.
I mean, I would just respond by asking, do you vote for people who promote bipartisan immigration reform, or do you vote for people who support President Trump, who has obstructed the immigration reform process? They passed a bill through Congress that was actually like considered to be very progressive and also funded, ICE and whatever, and Donald Trump vetoed it, and then got other Republicans to not support the overturn in the Senate or whatever and killed the bill. That was a couple years ago or something now. Like the Republican Party has consistently obstructed reasonable reforms to make coming into this country and being a naturalized citizen an easier process because they don't want people who are not white to be doing that. And then furthermore, I think it's really, we have to ask ourselves, why are these people fleeing these other countries in the Southern Hemisphere in the first place? And the answer is usually because we are warmongering, overthrowing their democratically elected governments, or funding CIA death squads to kill union activists in Brazil or something. Like our country is largely responsible for the political unrest that causes the quote unquote immigration surges like you were talking about, Caleb, with Joe Biden. Like, where did all of those immigrants come from? Well, they came from because we're fucking actively destabilizing Venezuela and Cuba and other places. We're like literally trying to overthrow these governments and supplant puppet regimes to control them for the profits of US corporations. And then we're like, oh man, we've got so many immigrants. It's like, okay, we're shooting ourselves in the foot. And then you're looking at me like, hey, stop shooting me in the foot. It's like, you did this, like it's amazing for like a progressive liberal, like a progressive person to be like asked about immigration on some level. Because like the GOP is in control of the government, and I agree. Again, the Democrats have been a part of it, but like the Republican Party is obstructing progress on this issue. I think that's an objective fact.
Well, I'll say I personally I agree with you on the facts that I think our immigration policies could use some reform. Like I think that there is reform that could be made there. However, I mean I'm just looking at this is peerresearch.org. They have an estimated 14 million illegal immigrants were let across the border in 2023. I mean, to me, there's a time for reform, and I just don't think that time is right now. If we're saying, hey, Joe Biden let 10 million illegal immigrants across the border every year, we have 40 million people here undocumented who are a burden on our economy, like Cooper just showed in this graph here. They commit crimes. What I mean, whatever you want, even if it's 1% of illegal immigrants commit crimes, that's still 1% more crimes than we should have. So I do think there is a time for reform, but I think the point of what Trump was doing in this sense of campaigning on it is we need to get everybody out first. We need to get the people who cut the line, who did this illegally, who are committing crimes. We need to get them out. And then I'm very for reforming the immigration policy. I think it is too difficult. I mean, we know we have a Muslim friend who's both of his parents were in cancer research, and it took them 14 years to get in here. I'm like, get them in here in 2 months. You know what I mean? But um, I don't see a reason for allowing even more people in when we have 40, 50 million people here who shouldn't be here in the first place, who are burdening our economy, spending our
Well,
money.
Well, the reason I would reference for letting them in is because I believe the data does show that immigration does have a positive net impact on communities and the nation in general, and that's always been the case in the United States, is when the United States wanted to grow more, wanted to expand, wanted to increase its industrial capacity because we needed more workers, we would let more immigrants in, and those immigrants came in and added to the melting pot and grew our economy. That's always been the case in American society, is that when immigrants have come into this country, they have contributed to the growth and the success and the prosperity of this country. And now suddenly that narrative is no more. Like suddenly we're nativist, we're isolationist. We think that, again, I do not agree with this man's analysis, and I think his reliance on public education, I think, is the tell. I think he truly is saying counting the electricity bill at every public school as money going to immigrants when that's just keeping the lights on at every public school in the country or something idiotic like that. I truly believe that like this is not indicative of reality and that immigrants do have a huge positive impact on our economy because they do not use public services. Like there's an argument to be made that like homeless people or like drug problems increase because of like the housing situation and like these immigrant populations are putting stress on like local fire departments or police departments. But that's like a housing question, which is a whole other issue, which I would make similar arguments to Republicans not wanting to implement a policy that would actually lead to every person having a house. They want there to be scarcity. They want there to be homeless people, so that we're all in this sort of precarious situation where we have to like plead and beg for the people in power to like let us live under capitalism. And so like there's this whole, it's all connected. And so like we're gonna bleed into other issues if we keep going on down that road a little
No,
bit.
I get where you're going. I mean, if you want to debate like, BlackRock and things like that, like I'm in that too, but I guess my question or my challenge then is if illegal immigrants we're supposed to just let them flow in or it's a net positive. I would agree that legal immigration is a net positive because generally legal immigrants are bringing a net benefit to America. The problem that I have with illegal immigration is we're allowing all these people in. What we're doing is we're saying, hey, if you go pick corn, hey, if you go do incredibly dangerous construction for $5 an hour, we'll slip you under the rug and we won't tell anybody you're here. That to me seems equally as shady because now we're just employing cheap labor, which is then hurting the American people because they are losing out on jobs that are now given to 40 million illegal immigrants who are breaking the law, but we're like, hey, we're just going to slip it under the rug if you do it for cheap.
Have you heard of the Taft-Hartley Act?
The what? Sorry?
The Taft-Hartley Act.
Taft-Hartley Act? I have not.
Really old law concerning labor law in the United States. And it says that workers who work in agricultural production, as well as workers who work on railroads, will have separate, unequal levels of civil rights under U.S. legal labor code compared to other workers who can organize a union at their workplace. And so you have examples. So the reason that like labor in the United States exists in the form of, like you just said, like if you go pick corn, we'll let you slip under the table and be an immigrant. The reason that happens and the reason that situation exists is because the capitalist class in the United States, aided and abetted by Republicans and Democrats, has created an unfair set of labor laws in the United States that create an underclass of workers. And so there are these jobs where companies benefit from being able to sneak these temporary workers in and pay them less wages that American workers would never accept, and conditions that American workers would never accept. And then, sometimes they go back, depending on the industry, they'll migrate back across the border or something. And sometimes they'll be more permanent workers in different industries. You should read the biography of Cesar Chavez, Sal Se Puede, about the Farm Workers Union. It's a good history of the Farm Workers Union in the United States, and it gives a little bit of history about the differences in those labor laws. So I agree with you that there's like some fucked up dynamics happening here, but the root of those problems is the capitalist superstructure. And I don't think any solution that the conservative parties in this country are offering is anything except like white supremacist nativism. Like if we just remove all the Latino people or all of the illegal immigrants. I think it's a dog whistle to sort of say we just care about illegal immigrants on some level. Like I do believe, again, they're committing like an ethnic cleansing right now. And I think that it's like they're being dishonest when they just talk about illegal immigration, because if they could get away with it, they would deport a lot more people who disagree with them politically. But again, like none of the solutions that they're proposing would actually solve the immigration process, because at the end of the day, they don't actually want to solve these problems. They want that the difference in labor laws and the exploitation of those farm workers and the railroad workers to continue. The reason the railroad workers are different is because historically in the United States, immigrants were brought in to build railroads, and they wanted to underpay those workers and to treat them differently than they paid white American workers who were Americanized into the system already. We're just living through the next iteration of manifest destiny in the United States. That's what's happening right now.
So is that Taft Act, TAFT, the Taft Act?
Taft-Hartley Act. Yeah, Taft-Hartley.
I am having trouble finding anything in here talking about underpaying. This is all like union related. Like you
That's
can't.
the way the law functions, is the law does not allow labor laws to apply to farm workers or rail workers in the same way that it applies to workers in other sectors. And so organ workers in farm situations do not have the same rights to like sue their employer for mistreating them on the job or to organize a union and stuff like that. And that leads to differences in the treatment of those workers in those industries. I mean, famously, railroad workers are kind of unionized in this country and they have high wages. But at the same time, the railroad industry compared to the agricultural industry is kind of in decline as an industry itself because it's sort of limited itself to coal and oil and other sort of freight. And we haven't really invested in passenger rail in this United States like we have in other countries. And so the railroad industry is sort of like, it's not exactly a relevant example to this point, but the agricultural industry exactly is still a relevant example. And it's in American history where the railroad example would be more analogous to what's happening to agricultural workers right now.
Okay, I'm just having a hard time
I have
connecting
a
to you. I'm
As a
not.
union, I was a union organizer in Boston. I mentioned that to you. So I'll just say that like that Taft-Hartley Act, it's about segregating workers into different classes of civil labor laws that apply to like what your rights are at work and what you can and cannot organize at work and how much you can be paid in general. The results of the way that law is written are that they've created an underclass of workers in the agricultural sector.
Interesting. Okay, yeah,
You should look into it more. I'm not going to like
I
lecture you.
will. I think there's a lot there to read into.
Yeah, it's very complicated and stupid. Union labor laws are notoriously like hard to understand, and they make them difficult to understand on purpose.
I have
Yeah,
a question for you,
Yes.
Joyce. Um, do you? This is like a pretty just simple question. Do you think that we should have laws that say that if you immigrate to this country illegally, you should be deported or not?
So, going back to this biography of Cesar Chavez and the American Farm Workers Union in the Southwest, like in California and around there. One of the things I just mentioned about the different types of workers and the different types of industries is that there would be people who would be like from Mexico or something, and even before like the United States was a thing, like they would move north to work in the fields, and to like work in industries like apple orchards or something, where the work would be seasonal or temporary, and a whole bunch of people would migrate north, and then when the work was done, those people would go back south. And then at some point, the United States government contrived a bunch of rules to create a hard border and made it impossible for people to sort of migrate freely. And you guys would probably think of that or call it an open border. But it's sort of just like a practical reality of US immigration laws that like disallowing people to move freely across the border, in my opinion, and I think in a lot of academic like data and opinion, it causes more problems than it solves. And so the idea that like people should be deported if they're here, like I think that like again, I'll just go back to my opinion that I do believe immigrants contribute more to the economy than they take because they're not allowed to take from certain federal programs. Um, I do think if people were allowed to move around, that the economy would be more sort of holistic in general. Like those people who want to live in Mexico but take advantage of the temporary work in the United States. Imagine if, Caleb, you're talking about all those people that came over with Joe Biden. Imagine if they wanted to leave at the end of the season. They just They just can't because that would mean like paying a whole other like $10,000 to try and cross the border to get work. Like we've created a system that makes it so difficult and arduous to do this, that is so stupid at every level, that we really need to like take a step back and be like, what are we doing? What are we doing? Um,
Can I ask, what would a perfect like southern border look like to you? Like, do we have a border at all? Do we have people checking people, vehicles? Like, what's the dynamic?
again, like I'm not an expert, but I think that something much closer to like on one end we've got an open border, no rules, whatever. That's not what I believe in. And then on the other side we've got a completely militarized wall with people with guns on one side, or something. Like I think it's, my opinion is somewhere closer to open border than not. But I think there's much more reasonable ways to do what we're doing, and I think that at the end of the day, it's the capitalism of it all that is corrupting our ability to promote reasonable immigration reform.
Okay. Okay. Joyce, thank you so much for sharing your beliefs and your opinions on these things. It is about 8:30. I was wondering, is there anything else you would like particularly like to talk about, Joyce, or if Caleb, you as well? If not, um, we could potentially wrap this up.
We have been talking about some pretty heavy stuff. So I kind of want to like, is it okay if I just ask you guys about something a little lighter that we can probably agree on? Like,
Yeah,
Open.
absolutely.
um, so I'm a big public transit person. And I'll also just say that like I do appreciate you guys having me on, and um, I'm sorry about maybe trolling you a bit and calling you white supremacists because
It's all in good
I
troll.
do think
I
you are
appreciate
a
a good
little
troll.
more. And it's interesting that you guys have like split with TPUSA and all that jazz. So I do think you are being a little more earnest than those TPUSA folks are being. So I'll just say that that's the only reason I'm continuing to have this conversation now, because normally I would not have a jovial conversation with someone who I believed was a dishonest white supremacist.
I appreciate
So
that.
saying that, moving on. There is a I'm a big public transit guy, and I'm trying to get people interested in building a commuter train between Omaha and Lincoln. Like, I want commuter train service between Omaha and Lincoln. And there's a state senator, Senator Juarez from LD5 in South Omaha, who's introduced a bill, LB 1098 and the legislative bill is to create a statewide rail plan, which sounds pretty basic, but like they've been refusing to do it since 2003. Like they just refuse to do it, and it's basically just like oh, these liberal city folks want us to do this thing, so we're not going to do it. And like a few years ago, there's this thing called the Intercity Rail Compact or something like that. And it's a bunch of like Midwestern Plains states who got together to like plan rail transit stuff. And it cost us like 15 or $25,000 to be a part of it, but like being a part of it got us access to like tens or hundreds of millions of dollars in federal funding. And there was just a senator, like a GOP senator, Kintner, I think, from a few years ago, who was like, we need to repeal this bill so we're not wasting $15,000 a year on these liberal pipe dreams and stuff. So like I'm gonna share a little link to the chat, and if you guys care to, I wrote like a little essay asking people to go and call the state senators on the transportation committee, who are really not paying attention to this legislative bill at all, and I don't think are gonna vote it out of committee unless someone calls them a lot. So if you care about that idea at all, or if you're interested in like a commuter train to Lincoln, the first step to doing that is we need to have a statewide rail plan. Like we literally can't do anything until like the state has a funding mechanism which involves a statewide rail plan. So like
So,
I'll be
so
honest,
sorry, my mouse just died, so I can't click on your link.
that sounds very reasonable. I don't know. I'm assuming we've all made the drive to Lincoln. If there's like
Eating.
10
About an
mile
hour.
an hour. There's like a 10-mile-an-hour gust. You got semi trucks and about to run you off the side of the road. So
I actually just rode my bicycle from Lincoln to Omaha on Tuesday.
Whoa.
jeez.
I took the Amtrak train down Monday night, and then on Tuesday morning, I started on a bike back, rode all the way back to Omaha as a
Okay.
part of like sort of popularizing this transit stuff.
Nice.
Oh shoot. I'm so sorry. My mouse literally just died. I
I
can't
can send you
really-
I'll send it to you on Instagram, I guess.
Perfect.
That works. Yeah.
Well, yeah, just based off of what you've said, yeah, I mean, I don't see how that could be a bad issue. It would create jobs. It would also, which is something I'm all for, especially locally. It would it would provide public transport from Omaha to Lincoln without, if you don't have access to a car or you don't have access to somebody who does have a car, you can purchase a train ticket.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I mean, obviously, I'm not as well versed in it as you are, but just based off of what you're saying, yeah, I'd be totally in support of that.
There's a list of the state senators on there and their contact information. Even like sending like a group email to them, or something would be great. Just for
Hack
me.
mail.
Yeah,
Hack email.
yeah, we can
You
do
guys have
a,
your social media, like you could promote that on your social media if you really cared about it or not. That's fine. I'm not gonna like follow you, track you down, and be like, hey, you didn't share. That's there. Just put it down,
Yeah,
putting them out there because they really care about public transit too.
well, that's a very uh, like good thing. I feel like just to have publicly available, especially like in a civilized society, having well, in a first world society, I think their buses, trains, taxis, things like that, are kind of a mark of if a society cares about the more than just the necessities of its people and
Yeah.
more into the conveniences. Although transport is, I would say, necessary to some extent. My oh no, my mic volume keeps going down and I can't change it because my mic died or my mouse died.
He's like
I guess-
slowly
Okay.
fade away.
Let's wrap it up before you get any softer,
Yeah,
though.
you get my point. I think I support that.
He's just getting quieter. Well, yeah, we appreciate you coming on. And honestly, if we want to do this again and debate some other stuff, I'm here for it. But yeah, hopefully we'll see this up on your podcast, and this will definitely be up on our channels. So yeah,
Okay, thanks, guys. Yeah, I'll see you later.
yeah, we'll see you later. Appreciate it.
Thank
You too. Cooper fades into the abyss.
Bro, what do I do? Can you hear me?
I can like barely.
Dude, what